Officer Troy Mendenhall, a patrolman in Louisiana, anticipated a typical traffic stop when he flagged down a composed driver. What unfolded was anything but routine. Mendenhall found himself drawing his firearm on a bona fide FBI agent, all captured on dashcam. Dusk painted the pine-lined St. Landry Road with long amber streaks. Deshaun Trenholm's day had been exhaustive. 12 hours of field work, interviews, relentless paperwork, capped by a working dinner with a state investigator over gumbo near I-10. He wasn't hurrying, nor was he exceeding the speed limit. He knew these roads well, living just a quarter-hour away. As Deshaun mentally prepped for tomorrow's debrief, cruising in his charcoal-gray Chevy Tahoe, flashing blue lights materialized in his rear view. No siren, just the silent flicker. He gently guided the SUV to the roadside, pulling close to an empty gravel lot beside a Baptist church. Weariness settled over him, but not surprise. An unmarked vehicle, a black man at the wheel, tinted windows. A combination that invariably drew heightened scrutiny on Louisiana's remote routes. He cut the engine, partially lowered his windows and kept both hands firmly on the steering wheel. The patrol car door slammed shut with an unnecessary emphasis. Deshaun caught a glimpse in his side mirror. A young white officer, likely in his early 30s, square-jawed with a buzz cut. His gait was unhurried yet stiff, chest out. Then came the voice, sharp, loud, and immediately tinged with irritation. License and registration. Step out of the car. No greeting, no explanation. Deshaun kept his voice even and subdued. Sir, I'd prefer to remain in the vehicle. I'm a federal agent, FBI. I am armed and my credentials are right here in my inner left pocket. I can retrieve them slowly. The officer squinted, then dismissively shook his head as if he'd heard countless similar excuses. Get out of the vehicle. Deshaun remained motionless. I am adhering to protocol. I'm informing you that I am armed and on active duty. Please allow me to present my badge and ID. The officer didn't yield, his hand hovering over his duty belt. You match the description of a suspect, he stated. Deshaun exhaled slowly through his nose. What suspect? I'll ask the questions, the officer retorted. Either you comply or I escalate. Deshaun turned deliberately, keeping his hands visible, and with 2 fingers, reached into his pocket. No sudden movements, no defiance. He produced his bureau badge and ID card, flipping it open. Special Agent Deshaun Trenholm, Lafayette Field Office. You are making a grave error. But the officer leaned in, a smirk playing on his lips, glanced at the ID for mere seconds, then retreated to his radio. This individual is displaying fraudulent credentials. I have a possible impersonator, male, late 30s, armed, refusing orders. Requesting immediate backup. Deshaun's mouth went dry, not from fear, he'd navigated far worse, but from the realization that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was intentional. This was the precise kind of situation that could spiral out of control rapidly. He knew too many stories, too many colleagues whose fate had been sealed by such encounters. He reached for something. He spoke louder this time, ensuring his words would be captured by the body cam he knew was active. My hands are visible. I have not exited the vehicle. I am a credentialed federal agent and have clearly identified myself. You are escalating a lawful stop without justification. The officer's eyes narrowed. You think I care about your badge? Deshaun offered no reply. His pulse remained steady, his hand unwavering. The 2 men locked gazes in the silence. A dog barked from a nearby porch. A screen door creaked. Someone peered out, then vanished indoors. In Deshaun's mind, he was calculating not how to confront but how to survive. There was no point in arguing. The next move wouldn't be his. It would come from backup, and the next officer's reaction might not be so composed. He glanced at the patrol car's dashcam. Good, it was perfectly angled. Then he murmured almost to himself, let's hope someone's watching this. But Deshaun was unaware that help wouldn't be arriving to de-escalate the situation. It was about to intensify. Officer Troy Mendenhall paced 2 steps back from the driver's side door, his hand still poised above his holster, like a gunslinger in a showdown. He believed victory was already his. His jaw was tightly set as if his mind was made up and nothing, no badge, no credentials, would sway him. Deshaun Trenholm remained still. The badge rested on the dashboard, the photo ID beside it, its gold lettering faintly reflecting the last vestiges of sunlight. But Mendenhall wasn't observing it. He was too fixated on staring down Deschamps as if waiting for him to break first. "Last chance," Mendenhall declared. "Either you step out of the car or I will extract you myself." Deschamps responded evenly, "And I am informing you that I am not a threat. If you escalate this, the responsibility is yours. My body is visible, my hands are where you can see them, and my weapon is holstered. You lack probable cause." Mendenhall didn't respond. He stepped back toward his cruiser and again lifted his radio. "Unit 42 to dispatch. I require immediate backup on this 10 to 29. Suspect is armed, uncooperative, possible federal impersonator. Location: St. Landry and Briarview." Deschamps heard the dispatcher confirm. He stared straight ahead through the windshield, his jaw now clenched. He was no novice. In fact, he'd dedicated the last 5 years to investigating officer misconduct and public corruption across Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi. He had spent enough time in squad rooms to understand precisely how things appeared when an officer allowed ego to seize control, and now he was living it. He glanced in his side mirror. Mendenhall was pacing again, peering into the rear of Deschamps' vehicle, perhaps expecting to uncover drugs or a weapon openly displayed. But there was nothing there. Only his case files, his bureau laptop bag, and a pair of gym shoes. The officer peeked again at the ID still prominent on the dash and shook his head. He wasn't seeing it, he wasn't hearing a word. Mendenhall moved once more, circling to the passenger side, checking the rear door handles. Locked. Deschamps kept his hands visible throughout, fingers splayed across the top of the steering wheel, as if he were back at Quantico, receiving instructions from a firearms instructor. The truth was he'd faced perilous situations: raids, gun trafficking busts, surveillance operations in cities far more dangerous than this 2-lane stretch of southern Louisiana. But this was different. Because this wasn't about crime. This wasn't about protecting anyone. This was about dominance. A man with a badge playing deity on a roadside with no accountability yet in sight. 3 minutes passed. Then came the second set of lights. Another cruiser pulled in behind Mendenhall's car, carrying 2 officers. A woman in her late 40s behind the wheel and a younger man in the passenger seat who appeared barely old enough to shave. Deschamps tracked them through his mirror. The senior officer approached Mendenhall, whispering something. Mendenhall gestured toward the Tahoe, clearly attempting to emphasize the perceived threat. The woman seemed unconvinced. She walked to Deschamps' window, tapped once. "Sir," she said calmly but firmly, "we're going to resolve this. Do you have identification?" Deschamps didn't speak. He simply gestured to the badge and ID already on display. Her eyes moved to it. She squinted, then her expression subtly shifted. She looked back at Deschamps. "Are you armed?" "Yes," Deschamps replied. "Right side holster, Glock 19, safety on, loaded, chambered, standard bureau issue." She nodded, then took 2 steps back and turned to the younger officer. Her voice dropped low, but Deschamps still caught one word: legit. Mendenhall's voice cut in sharply. "Are you certain?" He stated, "He claims he's FBI, but I don't believe it. The credentials look cheap, don't match what I've observed." The female officer looked at him pointedly. "You've observed many?" He offered no response. She tapped her shoulder mic and requested dispatch to verify the ID number on the badge and federal card. Deschamps didn't move. He understood what was transpiring. He knew how long it would take. Perhaps another minute, perhaps less. But what churned his stomach wasn't the waiting. It was Mendenhall still standing there, his thumb caressing the edge of his weapon as if even now, with additional officers present, with protocol in motion, he was seeking an excuse. But in less than 60 seconds, that justification would vanish, and Mendenhall's entire world was on the verge of upheaval. The voice over the radio came through, scratchy but distinct. "Confirmed. Deschamps Trenholm, Special Agent active. Badge number matches bureau records." It landed like a hammer blow. The female officer said nothing. She simply took 2 steps back and folded her arms, her gaze fixed on Mendenhall. The younger officer looked at Deschamps, then at his partner, uncertain whether to intervene or remain silent. But Mendenhall, he stood there stunned for a full 10 seconds before he blinked, as if the ground had been pulled from beneath him. He attempted to regain composure, adjusting his belt, shifting his weight, then casually walking back to Deshawn's window as if they were suddenly equals. "Agent Trenholm," he said, his voice now forced into calmness. "You understand we had to exercise caution given the current climate." Deshawn didn't respond, he simply stared at him. "I mean, no offense. You were being uncooperative." That was it. That was the sentence that ignited the fuse. Deshawn rolled down the window the rest of the way, his voice still steady but now lower. "You never requested ID. You ordered me out at gunpoint, then you called for backup claiming I was impersonating a federal agent. There was no cause and you know that. And don't attempt to blame this on protocol." Mendenhall stiffened. The other two officers maintained their distance. Deshawn continued, still calm. "Do you know how many officers I've interviewed in internal misconduct cases? Over 200. You all utter the same lines afterward. I was just being cautious. But here's what I've learned. Caution doesn't appear like this. Caution listens. Caution verifies the badge first." Mendenhall's lips moved as if to speak, but no words emerged. Then the female officer stepped in. "You're fortunate, Troy," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Because if he wasn't who he claimed to be and you had escalated this as you just did, we'd be here sorting out your mess with the coroner or worse, another protest downtown." Mendenhall looked away. That remark stung. Deshawn finally exhaled and leaned back in his seat. His hands remained visible, still steady, but beneath his composure, his heart was working harder now, not from fear but from self-restraint. He wasn't merely fighting for his own life anymore. He was doing everything in his power to demonstrate to young black boys across the country, indeed to anyone watching later, that remaining calm didn't signify surrender, that composure didn't equate to backing down. A third cruiser pulled up, lights spinning. A sergeant emerged, an older man, white hair, a no-nonsense stride, a clipboard tucked under his arm. He approached the group, took one look at the scene and inquired, "What's the situation?" The female officer quickly briefed him. The sergeant looked over at Deshawn. "Agent Trenholm, I'm Sergeant Reese Lorick. Just received confirmation from HQ. It appears there's been a serious miscommunication." Deshawn replied flatly, "There was no miscommunication. There was a refusal to listen." Lorick absorbed that. He nodded once. "No argument. Understood." Then he turned to Mendenhall. "You back of the line. No more talking." Mendenhall's mouth tightened, but he complied. The sergeant stepped up to the window, lowering his voice. "Agent, I'm not going to insult you with excuses. I've already seen the footage from his dashcam. You're right, he never asked, never checked. You did everything correctly." Deshawn didn't soften. "Not the first time," he said. Lorick nodded slowly. "I believe you. Look, we're initiating an internal review immediately. I'll personally contact your bureau supervisor." "Don't bother," Deshawn stated. "He already knows. He's the one who instructed me to wear a wire tonight." Lorick froze. That detail hadn't circulated yet. Deshawn allowed that to sink in, then reached over to the dashboard, retrieved his badge and ID and slid them into his jacket. The female officer raised an eyebrow. "Wire? Internal audit," Deshawn explained. "Mendenhall's name surfaced last month in a pattern of complaints. My field office sought to verify it." Sergeant Lorick stepped back, eyes wide. "Wait, you were baiting him?" "No," Deshawn said, slowly opening the door and stepping out. "I was driving home." But now that he was standing, everything felt different, and the next move wasn't about protocol. It was personal. The moment Deshawn stepped out of the SUV, the entire atmosphere on the street shifted. He didn't move aggressively, didn't utter a word, just stood tall, 6 feet 2 inches, squared shoulders, bureau ID still clipped inside his jacket. His Glock remained holstered. His eyes moved from one officer to the next, and not one of them could meet his gaze for more than a second. Sergeant Reese Lorick cleared his throat. "Agent Trenholm, I believe we need to have a more extensive discussion somewhere a bit more controlled." Deshawn raised an eyebrow. "You want to debrief me now?" Lorick shook his head. "Not officially. I mean, I'd prefer to avoid this escalating further. Give us a chance to do the right thing here." Deshawn looked over at Mendenhall, who now stood rigid beside his cruiser, arms folded, his face fixed in a blend of embarrassment and stubborn defiance. "You had your opportunity to do the right thing," Deshawn stated. Lorick sighed and gestured toward the female officer. Officer Gainan, could you ride with Agent Trenholm? Let's bring him down to the precinct just to talk this through calmly. Deshawn stepped back respectfully. No. Lorik blinked. Excuse me. I'm not setting foot in your department unless my bureau liaison is present, Deshawn clarified. And if you're smart, you'll have your internal affairs director sitting right beside you. I'm not granting you a second chance to get this correct. Officer Gainan said nothing, but her expression conveyed understanding. She knew better than to challenge a man with a badge superior to hers and twice her field experience. Deshawn turned to face her. I appreciate you treating me like a human being back there, he said. She nodded once. Wasn't doing you a favor. Just following the manual. Then you're one of the few, he remarked before walking back toward his vehicle. But he didn't get in. Instead, he reached into the rear seat and retrieved a small folder from his laptop bag. Inside were half a dozen typed complaints, all linked to Mendenhall's patrol number. Deshawn had begun compiling them weeks ago. Citations issued without cause, stops in the same two predominantly black neighborhoods, even a civilian recording of Mendenhall drawing his weapon on a teenager who hadn't committed any crime. He handed it to Lorik. Since you mentioned wanting to get ahead of this, he said, you might want to read what your department has been overlooking for months. Lorik took the folder hesitantly. As he flipped through the pages, his face altered. His jaw tightened as he skimmed line after line, each one pulling him deeper into a predicament he hadn't realized his officer had created. This is thorough, he muttered. It's not even the complete list, Deshawn said. We have body cam redactions and audio inconsistencies. One complaint states the footage from a stop simply vanished. You know what that sounds like? Tampering, Lorik said barely above a whisper. Precisely. The sergeant appeared to have aged 5 years in 2 minutes. He glanced back toward Mendenhall, who now avoided eye contact with everyone. Officer Gainan took a step closer, lowering her voice. Sarge, we can't conceal this. We're not going to. He said, but Deshawn wasn't finished. You want to de-escalate this? Good. Start by placing him on administrative leave immediately. No desk duty. No street. Badge and weapons surrendered by the end of the night. Lorik didn't argue. He simply gave a tired nod and signaled to the younger officer, who slowly walked over to Mendenhall and spoke softly. Whatever was said made Mendenhall stiffen. He unclipped his duty belt, hesitated, then handed it over piece by piece. His sidearm, his radio, his badge. It was the slowest unraveling of a uniform Deshawn had ever witnessed. But he didn't smile, he didn't celebrate. Because this wasn't a triumph. This was long overdue, and it shouldn't have required an FBI badge, a recorded conversation, and a comprehensive file to compel anyone to listen. Deshawn opened his SUV door, then paused. I'll be filing my report in the morning. I'll send the Bureau's preliminary findings to your IA director by noon. Sergeant Lorik sighed again. Understood. Deshawn got in and closed the door. For a long second no one moved. Then the Tahoe slowly pulled away, turning left onto Jefferson Spur Road. Not a word from him, not a backward glance. But the story wasn't over, not even close. It was just about to reach the public. Deshawn Trenholm remained silent for the initial 10 minutes of his drive. The Bureau SUV glided steadily through Lafayette Parish, the sky now fading to purples and navy blues. His hands gripped the steering wheel firmly, not from anger but from deliberate thought. Every moment since the stop had been meticulously logged in his mind, like pieces of evidence at a crime scene. He reached for the hands-free console and made one swift call. Agent Patel, he said as the call connected, I need everything we have on Mendenhall pulled up tonight. Internal Affairs is about to open a case, but I don't trust them to look beyond their own doorstep. Got it, came the reply. You could. I'm breathing, Deshawn answered. That's what matters. By the time he pulled into his driveway, a brick single-story home in the Pecan Grove area, he was already formulating the next steps. Laptop under his arm, badge clipped back into its case, his bureau notepad lay on the counter like a waiting journal. He'd barely penned the first sentence when his phone illuminated again. Unknown number. He answered anyway. Trenholm, this is Reese Lorik. The sergeant's voice was low, weary, but alert. You home? Deshawn leaned against the counter. Yes, why? Because someone leaked the footage, Lorik explained. Local station just aired 30 seconds of the stop. Your ID, the badge, your exact words when he ordered you out. Deshawn didn't blink. That didn't take long. No, it didn't. We're attempting to find the source, but it's out now and more is coming. What do you mean? Two neighbors had doorbell cameras. One captured audio, the other got the angle from across the street. It shows Mendenhall pacing with his hand on the gun before even speaking to you. That's already circulating on social media. We're losing control of the narrative. You never had control, Deshawn stated flatly. I imagine you'd say that. Deshawn ran a hand over his face. Let me guess, your department's receiving calls? More like threats. Protest groups are already tagging our Facebook page. A city council member from Opelousas posted that he's demanding a statement from our chief by sunrise. My inbox has 50 messages, half of them national news outlets. You're not calling for advice, are you? No, I'm calling to tell you I just came from Mendenhall's place. He's claiming you set him up, saying this was some kind of trap. Deshawn's laugh was bitter and brief. A trap? Yeah, that I provoked him, that I exploited my badge to create a scene. All I did was sit there. That was the entire threat. A black man who didn't panic. Lorik exhaled. That's why I called. Whatever's coming, I think we're beyond internal. This may go federal. I hope it does, Deshawn said, because I'm not interested in saving face. I want patterns exposed, and this wasn't just about one cop on one road. There was silence on the line. Then Lorik said, You know, Mendenhall said something to me right after you drove off. He said, I didn't see anything wrong. I just saw someone who didn't look like he belonged. Deshawn's grip tightened. And there it was, that quiet confession hidden beneath the uniform, that sentence that elucidated everything. That's the problem, Deshawn stated. That right there. I know, Lorik replied quietly. Deshawn hung up without another word. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment, then sat down at his kitchen table. He didn't need to anticipate what tomorrow would bring. News vans, bureau pressure, a department scrambling for explanations. But for now, in the quiet of his own home, he permitted himself the one emotion he hadn't dared to feel on the road: exhaustion. Not just from the traffic stop, but from the cumulative years of it. The constant awareness, the calculations, the perpetual readiness, even with a badge, training, and title. But Deshawn also knew something else. By morning, this would no longer be solely his story. The next morning, the Lafayette field office was already bustling when Deshawn stepped through the glass doors at 8:06 a.m. The receptionist said nothing, merely giving him a prolonged look as he passed. On the second floor, Agent Cheryl Dawes met him near the break room, arms crossed, phone in hand. It's everywhere, she stated. Footage hit national news late last night. CNN's running it, MSNBC too. Someone even edited the body cam audio over gospel music. Deshawn offered a tired half-smile. Guess I should be flattered. I'd be furious, she said. But then again, you've always possessed more restraint than the rest of us. They walked down the hall to the operations room. Inside, 3 supervisors, 2 analysts, and a very tense assistant special agent in charge sat at the round table. The screen on the wall froze mid-frame. Mendenhall's face squinting into Deshawn's window, one hand too close to his weapon. Trenholm, the key, Roland Beach said, take a seat. Deshawn slid into the chair without a word. Doors remained standing. Beach spoke again. I won't waste your time. The footage speaks for itself. You handled the situation professionally. You adhered to our use of force protocols precisely. You remained calm, clearly identified yourself, and recorded the interaction as instructed. Deshawn nodded once. But Beach continued, this is rapidly becoming political. Local press is pushing for a DOJ probe. Their mayor is attempting to frame it as a civil rights failure on the part of Lafayette Parish. I received a call from the Office of Professional Responsibility this morning. Deshawn leaned back slightly. Let me guess, they want me to keep quiet? They're recommending you avoid interviews, statements, or any media until further notice. Deshawn smirked. Because that's proven so effective for us before. Beach held his gaze. You understand how this operates? Yeah, Deshawn said. I do. That's why I'm not waiting for permission to be truthful. The room fell silent. Cheryl Dawes broke it. He's not a rookie, Roland. He didn't seek trouble, he was heading home. That man made the choice to escalate. I agree, Beach said. But the optics are significant. Deshawn interrupted. They're not optics, they're reality. You want me to remain silent because someone might be uncomfortable with the truth? What about how comfortable that officer was treating me like a suspect? No threat, no warrant, just my face and a government vehicle. Beach exhaled. No one here is doubting you. Then stop attempting to manage me. Cheryl offered a quiet nod of support. The analysts looked at their screens. One of them, young, pale, likely less than 2 years out of Quantico, shifted in her chair. Deshawn noticed. He softened his voice. Listen, I've done this work for a decade. I've sat across from officers who were angry, scared, broken. But the one thing they all shared was a moment, just one, where they were given an opportunity to choose. Mendenhall had his chance. He saw my badge. He heard me say FBI, and he still reached for the radio. Another silence, heavy, honest. Beach finally leaned forward. So what are your intentions? Deshawn looked at him calmly. I'm not formulating a plan. I'm documenting everything, filing the full report to DC, sending the unedited audio to civil rights. After that, it's up to them. I'll comply with whatever guidelines they provide, but I'm not going to vanish just to uphold some department's PR. Beach scratched his jaw. Fine, but I want a bureau media liaison copied on anything you write. If you get a statement request, you inform us first. Deshawn stood. I'll adhere to procedure. Doesn't mean I'll remain silent. As he walked out, Cheryl caught up to him again in the hallway. You good? She asked. He paused. I'm holding. Want me to speak to someone in DC for you? A quiet push on the oversight committee. He shook his head. No. This one's going to generate noise regardless. Let it. But outside those bureau walls, the noise was already louder than anyone had anticipated, and the streets were stirring. By lunchtime, the streets of Lafayette weren't just observing anymore. They were in motion. Outside the courthouse, across from the sheriff's department, a growing crowd had assembled. It began with a few neighbors holding signs that read, "Badge Blind Justice," and "Departmental Silence is Complicity." But by early afternoon, cars lined both sides of University Avenue, and local organizers from Baton Rouge and New Iberia had arrived with bullhorns, petitions, and local press in tow. At the center of the crowd stood Lenora Maddox, a 63-year-old retired teacher who had dedicated the past 2 decades to leading voter registration drives and speaking at city council meetings nobody wanted to attend. Today, she wore a red visor and a microphone clipped to her collar. This isn't just about Agent Trenholm, she declared, her voice loud and unwavering. This is about how easily some people still perceive us as a threat before they even ask for a name. If an FBI badge doesn't protect him, then what protects our sons, our fathers, our daughters in their own cars? The crowd erupted. Camera crews from KATC and WFB panned the protest. Twitter and Facebook feeds began overflowing with live streams. By 2 p.m., hashtag Justice for Agent Trenholm and hashtag Badge Didn't He Matter were trending statewide. Inside the sheriff's building, Chief Deputy Alton Dreyer stood behind a tinted window, observing it all, his jaw clenched. He turned to his assistant. Who informed the press about the footage? No one here, she said, at least not directly. He shook his head. There's no containing it now. We need a statement ready by 5. Nothing pre-written. Something genuine. Like what? Dreyer rubbed his temples. Start with this. We failed to adhere to basic protocols. We are taking immediate steps to address the officer involved, and we are cooperating fully with the Bureau. Got it. She nodded. Meanwhile, Deshawn Trenholm largely remained home. He had already submitted his final report to DC, spoken with the DOJ's Office for Civil Rights, and provided the full audio and dashcam footage. Still, his phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends, colleagues, strangers. Some offered support, others sought interviews, a few were simply enraged. Enraged this could still happen. Enraged it was so foreseeable. At 3:47 p.m., a name Deshawn hadn't seen in 5 years flashed on his screen. Kendra Louvier, a federal prosecutor he'd collaborated with on a trafficking case in Texarkana. She didn't call to inquire about his well-being. She called to ask what their next move could be. Deshawn, she said, this isn't merely misconduct, it's pattern-based. Your footage, the prior complaints, I just read your folder. This department has a ticking time bomb within it and you've just activated the timer. He sighed. I didn't set it. I simply refused to pretend it wasn't already counting down. Kendra didn't laugh. I have contacts in the Southern District's Civil Rights Division. They'll listen. But if you want this to expand, if you want DOJ to initiate a full probe, you require public pressure, and currently the pressure is on your side. Deshaun leaned back on his couch. Let it be. I'm not leading a movement. I'm not holding a press conference. You don't need to, she said. The story is driving itself. But if it expands, you might not have a choice. Meanwhile, across the city, schools were dismissing for the day. At North Lafayette High, students huddled around phones on the bleachers, rewatching the stop repeatedly. Some recognized Deshaun from career day last semester. He'd spoken about justice, about investigating corruption, about safeguarding communities. Now they watched that same man being ordered out of his vehicle like a criminal. A 17-year-old senior, Zaire Hollowman, stood up and quietly said, "That's what my uncle's been saying all along." His friends nodded. Across Louisiana and even in parts of Texas and Mississippi, the footage ignited conversations that could no longer be ignored. Parents asked different questions at dinner. Teachers incorporated new topics into morning discussions. Officers were pulled into impromptu briefings about use of force and bias training. The protest in Lafayette swelled again around 5 p.m., now nearly 200 strong. At the front, Lenora Maddox held up a poster with Deshaun's image and one sentence. Even the badge didn't buy him dignity. But as evening descended and the sun dipped low behind the courthouse, not everyone in the department was ready to accept that truth, and one of them was about to retaliate forcefully. At 6:22 p.m., Officer Troy Mendenhall sat alone at his kitchen table in a rented duplex off Barrett School Road, staring at a half-eaten plate of cold spaghetti and a buzzing phone he couldn't bring himself to answer. He hadn't left the house all day. The Lafayette Sheriff's Department had officially placed him on administrative leave that morning. Badge surrendered, weapons relinquished, no access to internal systems, no uniform, no patrol car. His voicemail was full, his group chat with other deputies utterly silent. He considered turning on the TV, but each time he did, there it was. His face, grainy and rigid, captured in that body cam shot, standing outside Deshaun's window, his hand a little too close to the holster. It wasn't supposed to unfold this way. Troy didn't consider himself a bad cop. He hailed from a long line of officers. His uncle served in Iberia Parish for 30 years, his older brother was a state trooper. He'd graduated from the academy second in his class. He followed the rules, most of the time. But even now, after everything, he didn't believe he had done anything wrong. He'd observed a man in an expensive SUV, hadn't recognized the plates. The man didn't seem anxious, but Troy had learned that sometimes the calm ones were the most perilous. And when that man declared he was FBI, something within him had snapped. He felt challenged, as if the badge in that man's hand somehow nullified his own. Now the entire country was witnessing that moment, seeing him as the antagonist. His phone buzzed again. This time he checked the screen. It was his lawyer, Mallory Dane. He answered. "Troy," she said immediately, "you need to cease all communication with anyone outside your representation. That includes texts, calls, Facebook posts, everything. Do you comprehend?" "I haven't said anything. I'm serious. Someone leaked that you've been asserting you were set up. I don't care if it was a joke or you venting. It's circulating and it looks exceedingly bad." Troy rubbed his face. "I didn't know he was truly FBI. Doesn't matter. You didn't ask and your microphone was live. Your own words are working against you." He didn't respond. Mallory pressed on. "DOJ's Civil Rights Division contacted me. They've opened a formal inquiry into your conduct. You'll need to provide a statement under oath. You'll also be subject to a deposition next week. I'll be present, but you must stop attempting to explain this to anyone. What happens if they declare I'm guilty of misconduct? They won't say it. They'll prove it. And if they do, you're looking at permanent decertification, Troy. No more badge ever." He swallowed hard. "This is my life." Mallory's voice softened slightly. "Then take it seriously, because this is larger than you now." She hung up. Troy sat still for a long while. He reflected on everything he'd done to earn the uniform. The ride-alongs, the incessant tests, the overtime, the stress, the instances where he genuinely did the right thing even when no one noticed. And yet none of that mattered now. Not when the entire world had witnessed his true demeanor in the heat of a stop. that expression in his eyes, that tone in his voice. He considered calling his brother, but he already knew what he'd say. You should have de-escalated. Troy stood and walked to the bathroom, washed his face, looked at himself in the mirror. He barely recognized the man staring back. There was a knock at the door. His pulse leaped. But when he opened it, an envelope was taped to the frame. No note, just an official letter marked with the sheriff's department seal. He opened it slowly. Inside, a notice of disciplinary hearing scheduled for Friday at 9 a.m., titled Pre-Termination Review. It struck him then, not just that he might lose his job, but that he might never again be trusted with authority. Not on the street, not in the department, not even in the neighborhood where he grew up. He closed the door and sat back down at the table, head in his hands. But while Troy Mendenhall grappled with the weight of his choices, the people outside his department were only growing louder, and the conversation was beginning to shift from one incident to a systemic culture. That Thursday night, inside a modest community center on Evangeline Thoroughfare, folding chairs were arranged in a circle beneath flickering fluorescent lights. There were no cameras, no press, just 30 locals. Teachers, postal workers, a few pastors, college students, each with something to articulate and finally a reason to articulate it. Deshaun Trenholm sat among them, dressed in jeans and a gray hoodie, not as an FBI agent tonight, but as a black man who lived 2 blocks away and had been pulled over for driving like he belonged. The meeting wasn't pre-planned. It began with a group chat between 2 church leaders that morning. By evening, word spread rapidly. We're meeting to discuss the stop, what it signifies. All are welcome. The first to speak was Reverend Clive Perrin, a soft-spoken man in his 60s with white hair and thick glasses. When I saw that footage, he began, I wasn't shocked. I was exhausted. Exhausted because I've been observing this kind of policing for longer than some of you have been alive. But seeing him, an FBI agent, treated like a threat, that cracked something open. Heads nodded, people murmured in agreement. Next was Ivy Law June, a single mother of 2 teenagers, both boys. I had to discuss it with my sons after dinner, she said, her voice strained. Told them again, keep your hands visible, be respectful, don't argue even if they're wrong. And my youngest asked me, but what if they still think I did something and I didn't? And I didn't know what to say. The room fell quiet. Then Deshaun spoke. You don't require me to tell you what this feels like, he said. You've experienced it. I just happened to possess a badge when it occurred to me. But that didn't shield me from assumption. It didn't grant me grace. And it certainly didn't slow his hand. He paused, then added, the badge didn't protect me. It simply made people pay attention. A woman in the back raised her hand. So what transpires now? She asked. To him? To the department? Will they rectify it? Deshaun took a breath. That's not a question for me. That's a question for all of us. Will we rectify it? Will we maintain pressure on city leadership? Will we demand genuine oversight, genuine training, genuine consequences? Or will we allow this to be another headline we forget next month? No one answered immediately. Then a young man, perhaps in his early 20s, wearing a UL Lafayette hoodie, spoke up. What would have happened if you weren't FBI? Deshaun looked him directly in the eyes. I probably would have been cuffed. Perhaps worse. The room stiffened, but no one disagreed. Another hand rose. An older woman named Mrs. Rosalind, a retired librarian, her voice slow but clear. I recall when we fought to integrate the schools here. People believed that would be the end of it, as if laws change minds. But the way we're policed, it's like our children are still being told, you don't belong, regardless of what's in your wallet or what letters are on your ID. Deshaun leaned forward. And the issue is, it's not always the obvious things. Sometimes it's subtle. A glance, a tone, an assumption that you're deceitful, that you're dangerous, that you require control. The group fell into silence again, thoughtful, heavy silence. Then someone asked, so what can we do next? Reverend Perrin replied before anyone else could. We continue to show up. We file complaints. We hold public meetings. We vote. We train our young people not just to endure but to lead. We write letters. We hold the microphone. And when one of our own experiences this, even if he wears a badge, we don't let him bear it alone. Deshaun looked down at his hands. I'm weary of bearing it alone. One by one, hands touched his shoulder, his back, the edge of his seat. No applause, no speeches, just presence. That night, the conversation didn't conclude in the community center. It spilled into front porches, kitchens, church halls, and corner stores. People began asking their own officers more questions. City council members received emails they weren't prepared for, and parents held new discussions at bedtime, not about fear but about dignity. But even as the community spoke louder, one last element remained, and it belonged to Deshaun himself. 2 days later, Deshaun Trenholm sat across from a microphone in a quiet, windowless podcast studio inside a community college radio station on the edge of Opelousas. The host, a local journalist named Vernon Slay, had reached out personally, promising no theatrics, no pressure, just space to articulate. It was the first time Deshaun had consented to speak publicly since the incident. Not in front of a press conference, not with the Bureau's media liaison hovering. Just him, Vernon, and a small red recording light glowing softly in the corner. Vernon leaned forward. "We can edit anything you're uncomfortable with. But before we begin, may I just ask, why here, why now?" Deshaun adjusted the microphone. "Because the individuals who need to hear this aren't sitting in a marble office in D.C. They're sitting in classrooms, in patrol cars, at kitchen tables. And if I'm going to speak, it has to be for them." The recording commenced. He didn't rehearse, he didn't hold back. "I'm Deshaun Trenholm. I've been an FBI agent for 11 years. I conduct investigations into corruption, misconduct, and civil rights violations across the southern region. Last Thursday, I was pulled over on my way home by a local officer who didn't inquire who I was, didn't examine my badge, and didn't care what I stated. He perceived someone he didn't trust, not due to a tip, not because of my demeanor, but because I didn't flinch." Deshaun took a breath, not to steady himself but to calibrate his next truth. "Everything I did was by the book. Hands on the wheel, calm voice, identification in plain sight. But it wasn't enough. And if it wasn't enough for me, with a federal badge, years of experience, and full legal authority, then what chance does a teenager have driving home from football practice with a broken taillight?" Vernon didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. Deshaun continued. "This isn't about virtuous officers or corrupt officers. It's about a culture that rewards apprehension over inquiry, that views control as authority and questioning as a threat. I didn't survive that traffic stop because I was fortunate. I survived it because I understood how not to frighten him. And that should never be the aptitude that preserves our lives." He looked up at Vernon. "That officer made a choice, but let's be honest, he didn't invent the rulebook, he simply adhered to it." Vernon spoke softly now. "So what would you say to people listening, people who saw the footage and felt powerless?" Deshaun sat with that question. "Then start small. Start locally. Understand your city council, your sheriff. File the complaint even when they assert it won't matter. Support officers who serve with integrity and demand the same from those who don't. We don't remedy this with hashtags alone. We remedy it with action." He leaned forward, his voice firmer now. "And if you're in law enforcement, take the time to scrutinize what you're taught to observe, who you're taught to fear. And ask yourself, when did prudence become license for disrespect? If your badge makes you feel superior, you're wearing it incorrectly." Silence lingered for a moment. Then Vernon ended the recording. They shook hands. No cameras, no applause. Outside, the Louisiana air was heavy but warm. Deshaun looked up at the sky, then down at the text still flooding his phone. Requests for interviews, speaking engagements, a call from the NAACP, one from the DOJ press office. He didn't answer any of them yet. He simply walked to his car and sat behind the wheel for a long moment, not in fear, not in anger, but with profound clarity. Because the truth was, Deshaun never desired to become a story. He just wanted to go home. But now that the world was listening, he wasn't going to squander it. He pulled out his notes again. Fresh ideas for a policy proposal he'd been quietly developing for months. A project aimed at redefining field training programs for officers in small departments. One that emphasized implicit bias, de-escalation, and most importantly, accountability from day one. He hit record on his phone. "Day one," he said, "starts with telling the truth. So here's mine. If you're watching this and it made you pause, don't stop there. Share it. Discuss it. Challenge someone. Ask yourself, who are we protecting and who are we failing to see?" Subscribe for more real stories like this, because silence won't fix anything but your voice might.